This is the despicable case of Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos, a former sex worker, led a transient existence before being convicted of the murders of 6 men in Florida during 1989 and 1990. Born with a tumultuous childhood marked by aberrant sexual behavior, Wuornos fled home as a teenager, eventually finding herself on Florida's highways, where she worked as a sex worker. Her killing spree, dubbed the Damsel of Death, commenced in late November 1989. Following her apprehension in January 1991, she confessed to 7 murders, leading to her sentencing to death in 6 of the cases. Despite debates surrounding her mental state, Wuornos was executed by lethal injection in October 2002 at the age of 46. Her story has been retold through various mediums, including documentaries, books, and even an opera. Notably, it was portrayed in the 2003 film Monster, featuring Charlize Theron, and more recently in the 2021 production Aileen Wuornos, American Boogie Woman. Aileen Wuornos came into the world as Aileen Carol Pittman on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan. Her parents, Diane Wuornos and Leo Pittman, had already split up before she was born. Following Diane's departure as a teenage mother, Aileen and her older brother Keith were taken in by Diane's parents, who later legally adopted them. Aileen never had the opportunity to know her biological father, who was incarcerated for child assault and tragically ended his own life while in custody. Aileen spent her formative years in Troy, Michigan, alongside her adoptive parents, Keith, and 2 older adoptive siblings, who were actually her biological aunt and uncle. Her childhood was marked by a traumatic event when she suffered facial scarring from a fire at a young age. Wrestling. With an explosive temper, she struggled to forge connections and establish friendships. At about age 10, Wuornos discovered that her parents were, in fact, her biological grandparents. This revelation drew comparisons in media reports to serial killer Ted Bundy, who also grew up believing his grandparents were his parents. This newfound knowledge exacerbated the already tense atmosphere in her unhappy household. Wuornos' grandfather, Laurie, known for his strict discipline, subjected her to distressing experiences, including once forcing her to witness him submerge a kitten underwater, taking its life. Wuornos later stated she was physically and intimately assaulted by her grandfather and brother during childhood. When she was 11-year-old, Wuornos began offering sexual favors to boys she knew if they paid her or gave her cigarettes, resulting in them calling her Cigarette Pig. Wuornos fled her home multiple times, leading to her eventual placement in juvenile detention. At the age of 14, her grandfather, Laurie, sent her to a home for unwed mothers in Detroit when she became pregnant. Initially, she claimed the pregnancy resulted from an assault, but later offered varying explanations. In March 1971, she gave birth to a son, whom she ultimately gave up for adoption. Following the birth of her child, Wuornos dropped out of school and drifted between juvenile detention, her grandparents' home, and periods of living in the wilderness or abandoned vehicles. Tragically, her grandmother Britta, who battled alcoholism, succumbed to cirrhosis of the liver on July 7, 1971. At this juncture, Laurie, her grandfather, refused to continue caring for his 15-year-old granddaughter. Less than 5 years later, in March 1976, Laurie died by suicide, as documented in Sue Russell's book, Lethal Intent. Aileen chose not to attend the funeral. By this time, she had embarked on a journey across the country through hitchhiking while still involved in sex work. In Florida, she crossed paths with Louis Gratz Fell, a wealthy yachtsman. Despite their significant age gap, Fell being about 5 decades older than the 20-year-old Wuornos, they married in May 1976. However, their marriage was short-lived, as Fell left Wuornos within a month. He cited her violent and ungovernable temper and accused her of assaulting him with his cane. Wuornos countered, alleging that Fell had been the aggressor. Their marriage officially ended in divorce on July 19, 1976. Tragically, in the same month, Wuornos suffered another loss. Her brother, Keith, passed away from cancer. During the mid-1970s, Wuornos faced legal trouble, including arrests for assault, disturbing the peace, and disorderly conduct. In the early 1980s, she served time for armed robbery after a drunken attempt to rob a convenience store, reportedly wearing a bikini, as detailed in Peter Vronsky's book, Female Serial Killers. Wuornos's criminal record also included offenses such as forged checks, resisting arrest, theft, and drunk driving, with some crimes attributed to the use of fake names she frequently employed. In June 1986, adopting the name Lee, Aileen Wuornos encountered 24-year-old Tyria Moore at a gay bar in Daytona, Florida. Their connection swiftly evolved into a passionate relationship spanning 4.5 years, during which they cohabited. While Moore secured employment as a housekeeper or maid, Wuornos resorted to sex work along the highways of Florida. Wuornos, possessive by nature, exhibited discomfort when Moore ventured out to work or interacted with others. Their living situation was transient, as they frequently relocated between motels, apartments, and mobile home communities in Daytona and other parts of Florida. It was amidst this relationship that Wuornos's criminal activities escalated to murder. Embroiled in the unfolding investigation, Moore eventually cooperated with authorities, turning against her girlfriend. From late 1989 through the fall of 1990, Wuornos embarked on a spree of violence, fatally shooting 7 middle-aged and older men along highways in North and Central Florida. Aileen Wuornos's first victim was Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old repair shop owner known for soliciting sex workers. He was last seen on November 30, 1989. According to Tyria Moore's testimony, Wuornos confessed to Mallory's murder the following day. On December 13, 1989, Mallory's body was discovered at an illegal dumping site in the woods. Over the following months, the bodies of 5 more men were found. Construction worker David Spears, 43, was discovered on June 1, 1990. Charles Carskadden, a part-time rodeo worker aged 40, disappeared on May 31, 1990. His remains were recovered on June 6. Salesman Troy Burris, 50, was found deceased on August 4, 1990, 5 days after he was reported missing. Child abuse investigator Charles Dick Humphreys, 56, was found on September 12, 1990. Walter Antonio, a trucker and reserve police officer in his 60s, was discovered on November 19, 1990. Throughout this period, Wuornos frequently returned home with newly acquired possessions to pawn and vehicles that she had borrowed. She utilized various aliases when pawning items belonging to her victims, complicating efforts to track her down. However, in July 1990, authorities inspected the vehicle of Peter Seams, a 65-year-old missionary who had disappeared the previous month. Witnesses reported seeing Wuornos and Moore exiting the car, and a fingerprint found on the door handle matched Wuornos's. By the fall of 1990, news that authorities were searching for 2 women suspected of murder prompted Moore to flee Florida and abandon Wuornos. On January 9, 1991, Wuornos was apprehended at the Last Resort Bar in Port Orange, Florida, on an outstanding charge. Shortly thereafter, police located Moore in Pennsylvania, and she struck a deal to provide evidence against Wuornos in exchange for immunity from prosecution. In mid-January, during a phone conversation with Moore, Wuornos admitted to the murders, claiming she committed the crimes out of a desperate desire to remain with Moore. Despite legal counsel advising against it, police recorded Wuornos confessing to 7 murders. The public's fascination with the case was fueled by the sensational nature of the crimes and erroneous media portrayals of Wuornos as the nation's first female serial killer. She was dubbed the Damsel of Death. Wuornos faced her first trial for the murder of Richard Mallory. Throughout the January 1992 proceedings, Wuornos claimed that Mallory had raped and assaulted her, details that contradicted her earlier video confession. Although it was not disclosed in court, Mallory had a prior conviction for attempted sexual assault. However, no other sex workers came forward to recount similar violent encounters with Mallory. On January 27, 1992, a jury found Wuornos guilty of first-degree murder and robbery. Just 4 days later, on January 31st, the judge sentenced Wuornos to death. 2 months later, in March 1992, Wuornos chose to plead no contest to the murders of David Spears, Troy Burris, and Charles Humphreys. She subsequently entered separate guilty pleas for the killings of Charles Carskadden and Walter Antonio, receiving a death sentence for each plea. Peter Siems's body was never found, and Wuornos was not charged with his murder. Initially, Wuornos maintained that she had acted in self-defense when killing her victims, but she later recanted these assertions. Law enforcement believed that she targeted men who either picked her up while hitchhiking or stopped to assist her on the highway. After spending a decade on death row, Wuornos made the decision to dismiss her appeals lawyers, who were actively working to secure a stay of execution for her. Despite arguments from a court-appointed attorney suggesting that Wuornos exhibited signs of severe disconnect from reality, the Florida Supreme Court ruled in April 2002 that she was competent to terminate her legal representation. In early October 2002, Florida Governor Jeb Bush revoked a temporary stay of execution following assessments from 3 psychiatrists who determined that Wuornos possessed the mental capacity to comprehend the death penalty and the rationale behind its imposition. October 9, 2002, Wuornos was executed via lethal injection in Starkey, Florida, at the age of 46. Her purported last words were, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back." Like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back. Following her execution, Wuornos's remains were cremated, and her ashes were scattered near a tree in Michigan.